I call this meeting to order of the Highland Township Government Study Commission at 7 o'clock at the Highland Sportsman Club. We will now start with a prayer followed by the pledge.
Dear Lord, please be with us tonight to help and guide us to make good decisions for the whole of Highland Township. Help us bring back our God-given rights that you have bestowed upon us, protect our environment, to live a life free from toxins, and guide those that need your guidance. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we're going to do a roll call. Commissioner, state your name and present. John Gurris, present.
Lloyd Ewing's present.
Judy Orzetti, present.
Matt Vaughn, present.
Bill Edinger, present.
Misty Edinger, present.
Amy Beers, present.
All right, I open the floor for a public comment, and we're going to have a limit it to 3 minutes.
I have a question, is that okay?
Yeah.
I want to know about, can somebody explain about ordinances, how they'd be handled? Like, I don't know how they're handled now. I think the supervisors just, if they have to make an ordinance, they just, I don't know how they do it, but I mean in the future, if this gets enacted, how would you, and I don't understand how that would work.
How ordinances would work?
Yeah, how would you have an ordinance? How would it originate, and how would it, would it have to go on a ballot? Is that how it works?
No, the supervisors usually make the ordinances, where we would have a opportunity to, as home rule, to initiate or oppose something that the supervisors put in an ordinance. We would have that right through initiative and referendum. So if we wanted to either oppose one that they've made or one that we want to bring up, then that would go on to the next vote.
So not like the last meeting we had, we talked about Tom Orzetti and his chickens. I think it was an example. How did, would it be a problem to say if somebody would complain about his chickens? Is that why it was brought up? I don't understand what led to that or what the outcome.
He was using an analogy.
Yeah,
That was just a hypothetical.
say for example, somebody didn't like Tom having chickens, and there wasn't an ordinance already about not allowing him to have chickens. A person could go out, any citizen could go out and get a petition signed of about 10% of the voters or the residents of the township, and then it would go up on a ballot as a question to vote on.
Yeah, but if
Should there or should there not be chickens?
But what if it was chickens, and let's say people voted against it, that they didn't want chickens? Does that mean nobody can have chickens? Is that
If 51% of the voters decided that they didn't want to have chickens, then there was no.
in the whole township? See, that doesn't make sense to me. I don't see how you could do that.
Right now, there's an ordinance that says you're not allowed to have farm animals, chickens or
Well,
one.
everybody has farm animals, and not everybody, but I mean,
Right.
they're.
I mean, it's not enforced, but it is an ordinance.
So if it's like a law, then why would you, it's like you're trying to get people to break the law if they want to live their normal lives. See, I have a real problem with this. With, right now, I don't know of any ordinances. I've been living in Highland for more than 50 years, and I just found out the other day there were ordinances. So, now you're going to tell me there's going to be formal ordinances out there. It's like saying a law, and I have to,
There are already formal ordinances. What you're looking at, and you should look at it this way, you're looking at a recourse. Let's say if there's an ordinance on the book that's against you, you still have a recourse to fight that ordinance, get people to think the same you as you to do it, if it was an unjust ordinance. Don't think of it as somebody's going to go around and put a thumb on it. Basically, this is trying to get people to make up their minds how they want their government to be ran.
Yeah, but I guess the point I'm making is, right now, I don't have to do anything. You know, if I wanted to put up a chicken coop, I would do it, I don't even ask anybody. But if there's gonna be like a law against that, then that just doesn't seem, you know,
There already is a law against that. Nobody has enforced it in the township.
so how are you gonna enforce laws then? You know, you're gonna put these ordinances out there, how's it gonna be enforced?
We're not putting these ordinances out
Well,
there,
if
the
one-
township already has them.
Yeah, but how do you
in
enforce
effect.
them? How are you gonna enforce ordinances?
That's the township and part of the government study commission is that it'll go to a vote. If somebody comes up and says that they don't want your chickens out here in Highland, it'll go to a vote.
Yeah, it just, something
Okay.
about that doesn't seem right to me.
At the present time, all it takes is 2 supervisors to say, this is your law, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's opposed to 2 people as opposed to 51% of the population.
But Jim's back there.
Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes.
Tell us how we can.
So
enforce
2
it.
people don't like you and they're supervisors, they'll say, you can't have your farm animals. And right now, there's an ordinance against it.
So they could
But
enforce it.
normally, nobody bothers about it, and 51% of the people would have to be called upon, right?
Right.
Right.
And as opposed to 2 supervisors. Am I correct?
Right.
Yes.
Go ahead, Tim.
One question, you brought the subject with the ordinance of chickens as an example. Do you have a copy of that ordinance at the moment? Because it depends how it's written. If we're talking about it, it doesn't have to be in for Highland Township as a whole. It could be according to close proximity. What you mentioned about chickens, I think, is because of James City itself, a small community. And that's where this ordinance came from the people in James City years ago. And there was an act about supervisors, so it's on there. But if somebody wants to push the issue, if you live in Highland, there's no problem. So there's nobody.
Well, another thing, it has to
But I don't know
be,
what the ordinance states at the moment. You'd have to see the ordinance that right now, how it's written up before you get too excited and start.
And I know of 2 people that have chickens, so. You know,
Well, I
it's
know a
not
lot
an
of
ordinance
them
being
do.
pushed, yeah.
What about something like a business though? What if somebody wanted to stop a business from being, you know, if somebody thought maybe their neighbor was gonna build like a sawmill or something like that, and they put out an ordinance, they wanted to stop that. So could they do that? Just by getting enough signatures and submit it, and then turn it into as, to get voted on, right?
Yeah.
Well, why would you do that? Stop somebody from, you know, if it would be written so that you couldn't have a business that was like that. And I'm assuming this would be in James City, because that's where most of the problems are. But what about the rest of Highland? Why couldn't you build a sawmill somewhere else then? If it was a sawmill, like say, for example.
I don't think I personally wouldn't vote or think that would come up to
Yeah, but I
a
don't
vote.
think, I mean, it's just a lot of things could
Businesses.
happen, you just don't know.
It can
It's
happen
not,
right now.
it's not only James City, it's the whole Highland Township.
Yeah,
It's
that's
not
what I
just
mean.
James City, it's the whole Highland Township. That's why we're trying to get people more involved in this, is because people don't realize from Highland and Russell City what the ordinances are for all of Highland Township. Is if somebody wanted to come up from Highland and say at the township that so-and-so has chickens, they can stop you from, one person that lives beside you can stop you from having chickens out here in Highland. It's the whole Highland Township that's not involved, it's not only James City.
Why can't you just put it for James City? Is there a reason you can't do
Because
that?
we're all one voting populace.
There could be
We are
stipulations in
Well, I
there
mean,
about
people
chickens.
go
I
to
mean, we're
James
killing
City.
a chicken to death. If you're living in the middle of James City, or if you're living in the middle of Highland, and you have 10 houses around you, and you have a nice $200,000 home, and your neighbor doesn't care, and he has his yard piled full of shit, and he moves in some chickens, you're gonna be upset. What if they're over there shitting on your nice freshly blacktop driveway? You're gonna get upset. There's gonna be stipulations. It's not saying we're outlawing chickens in all of Highland Township. We're not outlawing all of sawmills in Highland Township. We're not here to take rights away from people. We're here to try and give rights back to people.
Yeah, I just,
They're not rewriting all the ordinances. They're already written.
well, if you adopt home rule though, why would it,
You could have an ordinance if you don't want chickens, the stipulation is you have to have at least 3 acres of land, you have to keep your chickens within a few hundred feet from your neighbors, so forth and et cetera. If your chickens escape, you're gonna get fined for it. You know, it's not just to take something from you.
And then again, you'd have to have 50% or more of 50% of the whole township would have to vote yes or no. So,
Well, what's gonna change though, as far as the home rule goes? What type of government are you gonna have? Are you still gonna have supervisors? Are gonna be like a council of some sort? Or how's
No,
that
we're
gonna
gonna
work?
keep, and it's up to you guys because you have to vote on it. But I think the consensus with us is we're planning on keeping the 3 supervisors intact to run the normal affairs of the township business. Because like we reiterated, once we're done, and if we write our charter, the next thing is we're gone. You're gonna vote on the charter, you're gonna get something on the ballot to say if you like what we've written, if not, you're gonna vote on it. If 51% of the people like the charter, it's adopted. You will never see us again. We are gone.
one thing that would change though is we have 3 supervisors, but there'll be a Bill of Rights for the people, which the code and the ordinances now, or the township code, doesn't have any rights for people. This would provide rights for us and our property, our ecosystems, and give us some ability to have a say on what's going on in our neighborhoods or our community.
It's more about protection
Yeah.
rather than from taking.
Right.
You know, you wouldn't want somebody's, well, you talked about a lot of sawmills. You wouldn't want, well, I tell you what, I know that in Ridgeway one time, a person was barbecuing, and they stopped them because they stopped them from barbecuing because the smoke was going into the neighbor's house. I wouldn't want smoke in my house, and that makes sense. So it's about protection more than taking. I don't know how big this township is, but I can't imagine a person having his rights taken, like one of you said. If you're out somewhere doing nothing to anybody, there's an old story, if you go out your backyard to shoot an arrow over your house, and it comes down and lands in your yard, that's okay. If it goes through your neighbor's head, that's a problem.
Right.
You know?
We're all
So,
about giving the rights back to the people
That's
and
what
not
this is
taking
about.
anything away from the people. It's all about giving the rights back to the people. That's what we're here for.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jim.
Oh, no, nobody's taking your rights away. Let's
Right.
get that straight. You have the rights, and we as supervisors are not taking your rights away. We're here to look out for your betterment, not to push something down your throat.
Right.
Now, this nuisance ordinance you're talking about, I think, without going over to the house and getting a copy, there is an acreage or a square footage allotment written into that thing with the farm animals. If not, my friend Roy Stillman up there got 400 acres. He's got 100 chickens and 25 cows. We could, put him out of business. So let's look at this thing from a standpoint where everybody can understand what's going on.
Right.
We as supervisors are not here to kill you people. We're out here to work with you.
I don't call
Yeah,
what you just did working with us.
Well, how do you figure that?
Well,
What did I say wrong?
I'm not saying you personally said anything wrong. What I'm saying is, okay, if the ordinance trying to keep the injection well away, if it indeed was illegal, okay?
Unconstitutional.
Unconstitutional, illegal. If it was indeed that way, how I would have handled it if I was a supervisor is I would have called a meeting with everybody in Highland Township, invited everybody and said, you know what? We have to do something. But that's not how it was handled.
Hand out to
It
him.
was handled,
It was handled through the legal department.
special meetings. All of us Highland Township residents were in the dark. And we all felt pissed because none of us wanted it.
Well,
If you would have been honest with us and upfront and said, you know what, we need to do something, we need to do it now, we want your opinion, what you say matters, we could have said, you know what, okay.
you know, you're right to a point, but we as supervisors listen to the legal department,
The judge didn't make a decision on that though.
not the
Before
judge.
you
I
said-
said our legal department. The solicitor for the township, the newly appointed solicitor for the township, another lawyer who's supposed to represent the township. We listen to them. I called my own personal attorney and presented it to him.
And if you don't mind me asking, what did they say to you?
Yeah.
What did they say?
They said you cannot win this lawsuit. There's no way possible Highland Township can win it.
So why wasn't the attorneys working for the Highland Township, the two attorneys, why weren't they at a meeting and say to everybody,
They were at the last supervisors meeting.
and
It was made, the decision was made.
the decision was already made though?
And they weren't aware what was being
No, the
injected into the
decision was
law
made, the
either.
decision was made at the meeting.
Well,
The attorney advised us that this is the way it is. We as supervisors cannot make a decision unless it's at a public meeting.
I don't think we're trying to say that supervisors are trying to kill us, as you mentioned earlier. But what we're trying to say is that the second-class township in the government that we have right now does not recognize the people or the rights of the people or the rights of the ecosystem. And that's why we want to get a home rule in, because then not only the three supervisors will have a choice, but 51% of the whole Highland Township, which might not have conflicting interests other than wanting to have just clean water. Go ahead, Tim.
I agree with you, John. I guess when I was in school, I was taught that we had a representative government. We were taught that we would vote people in to represent the needs of the people and their wishes. So that's why I'm here at this meeting with Home Rule, because I don't believe that the people's voices are being heard, whether something's legal or not, or what they consider legal, because just as an example, when somebody goes to court, there's two lawyers. Just like a football team or baseball team. One side wins, one side loses. So, I think it's up to the people in the community to have a say. And there again, I think people need to be representative, and I think with Home Rule, my personal thoughts are, at least you have a say in it. And if you live in a community that doesn't think the way that you think, so you can make a choice and go ahead and move, but for somebody else to make a decision for you is a tough thing to do, especially when there's more like minded people that want a decision made in a certain way for the community.
We were facing this battle with the injection well with other supervisors, and they didn't cower down. They didn't back down. They said, you know what? I may have a personal view of, yeah, I don't want to be sued. I would rather get rid of the ordinance. But they listened to the people. They were willing to go down with the people in Highland Township that did not want to take the risk of their water being poisoned. So I just have a hard time believing with new supervisors that all of a sudden it's unconstitutional. I don't know what baffles me.
You know what else? Is it took months to get that ordinance passed. And how many days did it take to get banned?
Exactly.
It didn't go to the people, it wasn't a process, it didn't seem to go to proper channels.
So I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Me?
Yeah.
Okay, so you had an ordinance, it got repealed. Let's say you do the home rule charter, and 51% vote to not accept the injection well you're talking about. How is that any different?
Can I suggest, we were gonna plan to go through, I believe, a charter draft tonight, which may answer a fair amount of these questions.
Okay.
Of how that would work and things, and so that may be a more, a better way to go, is actually run through
Okay.
the charter draft and then see if there's questions on that later on.
Yeah, we're gonna be running through that a little later.
Yes.
All right,
It sounds like we were going somewhere where there wasn't a, you know.
Right. All right, Mike, you,
And
Mr. Campbell?
I was just thinking that the county commissioners passed a resolution against injection wells, which has no legal status, but that's something to consider too, that the county commissioners are on your side. I think even Matt Gobbler, our state representative, is on our side.
Yes,
So,
yes, Matt Gobbler is.
something to consider.
I'm sorry, remember what?
Okay, any more questions?
Yeah, I have another question.
Okay.
I asked a question last meeting we had there about taxes. And I think, as you explained, Misty said that taxes can't be raised on this, but I've read this thing a few
Say
times,
taxes
probably
can't be
5
raised.
times, and it says there's no limit to how high the taxes can be raised. But you
Yeah.
have home rule.
We're gonna cover that underneath the draft of the charter, but I'm thinking we're going, thinking on maybe putting a limitation on taxes.
Well, yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It has to be part of the charter.
Yeah,
You put
and it will
in there
be,
the limit how high the taxes can go.
exactly.
I mean,
and it-
when I read about this, one of the reasons people or municipalities choose home rule is so they can raise taxes. Let's say they want to do something that costs more money than that they could pull in from the county or whatever it is. So they, they take a poll, I guess, or a vote, the citizens vote on it. And if they need something, like let's say they want to build a stadium or something like that, they need extra money, well, that's why they do this.
But there's only a percentage that you can raise the taxes. Jim, what is it a year?
10%.
There's only 10% you can raise it, and if you actually research Highland, and I think they really chastised Charlie Vaughn, who was in there? Then Charlie, George Punk, and Jake. When they were in there, they actually did something that's unheard of. They actually rescinded your taxes and backed it down. Highland Township is very lucky. Nobody's out to try and raise your taxes.
I'm not saying that, but where does 10% come from? I didn't read
10%
that.
is legal, you have to, it's state law.
Well, this goes beyond the state law, though. That's what the home rule thing is for.
But you cannot supersede state law.
It's not what it says in this, not what I read.
There are certain
no limit.
things that we cannot supersede.
You can't raise taxes on non-residents. I know that.
Right.
But
Non-residents.
there's no limit to how high you can raise them on residents. That's what
Will
it
this be
says
covered
right in here.
underneath the tax? This is
I'm
gonna
not
be,
saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying you
This is
have to
gonna be
put that
covered.
in the charter.
Chad, he's gonna be covering that a little more detail.
The 10% rule was put in because of the school districts raising taxes to build new schools. This is about 10 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, to limit. And if you'll notice, Kane School District raises their taxes, the
Yeah,
limit.
they just raised them this year.
Yeah, right, they're right up to the 10% limit every year.
Okay, Lord.
So, you know, and let's face it, Highland Township don't get much tax base from the residents.
We don't get nothing.
I hear this all the time, they're gonna raise my taxes. I mean, look at how much tax you pay to the
Our
town.
mills we pay mills. Our mills are nothing.
Yeah, all our tax is a school tax, most of it.
The school tax is what kills you.
Exactly.
Okay, Lori?
John, I just wanted to add one more thing that I found really ironic, that this decision to drop the ordinance was made, I believe, 2 or 3 days before we were supposed to, well, not myself, but our groups were allowed to be interveners on this.
Have a chance, yeah.
Yeah, so we didn't even get.
Possibly would have had a chance on the 15th, yeah.
Exactly, what was 2 or 3 days?
Yeah.
So, that's just another thing that
Yeah.
pisses me off.
All right.
Because,
All right, so you say,
sorry, okay.
If
Probably do.
anybody
Thank you.
wants a copy of this ordinance that was rescinded just recently, there are copies of that for everybody. And that's a copy of the recent ordinance that was rescinded. This is what was protecting us that's no longer in place.
What was that about? You don't
This
mind
is
me
the injection, this is the injection well ordinance that is no longer in place.
asking? See the copy of that.
That means if, once they rescinded that, if Senate Resources or another person wanted to put a injection well over here in Highland, right next to your property, they don't have a say on it.
Okay.
They're allowed to come in and do that.
I think the only thing we're waiting on now, Jim, whether it happens or not, is DEP still has to issue them a
Right,
permit.
you know, I've asked the water company.
again?
I think the only thing right now, anyways, what's your name, sir? I've
Bill.
never, Bill, nice to meet you, sir.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you. Right now, what's happening with that right now is the only thing that's in a standstill is DEP has to issue them a permit. But what was happening before is DEP would not issue them a permit because we had an ordinance in place. So now, we're gonna see what happens.
I asked the water company to send a letter to DEP stating the fact that Seneca has not chosen to do anything to protect our water source. And until they do, please don't offer them.
Thank you for doing that.
That's nice, thank you.
I think it's great that everybody writes letters to the DEP, but I don't think they're going to help
By
us.
law, we're not allowed to.
But you're representing us.
I know all that.
Can
But the
all the people
supervisor
here
didn't
write
like the
letters?
ordinance
Yes, I
either.
could.
Yes, anybody in this room can write letters to the DEP.
Everybody should write letters.
Right, to protect all of Highland Township. It's not just James City, it's all of Highland Township.
And hopefully Elk County.
Right.
Do you have to be a registered voter to do that?
Yes.
Yes.
You don't have to be a registered voter to write DEP a letter.
I think if you
Not to write
have,
letters, you don't. You've got to be a registered voter to
Not during.
participate in this.
yeah, in Highland
I
Township.
mean, the best thing you can do is solicit our congressman for a representation. I mean, as many letters as we can write, the better off.
Yeah, I think we're just going on the agenda here.
Right, that is correct.
All right, we're gonna have questions and answers a little later, and we're also gonna be showing you a draft. We're talking about a draft, so we're gonna move on the agenda. We will now hear the reading of the minutes from the secretary.
Roll call, our commissioners was done. Amy Beers was present, Misty Edinger present, William Edinger present, John Garris present, Lloyd Hewlings present, Matt Vaughn present, Judy Orzetti present. Public comment period was opened by Chairperson John Garris. Discussion was held for approximately 45 minutes. Concerned citizen asked if a charter was written yet. It was explained that we are still in the process of gathering information. Concerned citizen wanted to know what brought home rule to Highland. It was explained that it's an option available to citizens across the nation for many years. Home rule was again explained to Highland Township citizens, and the commissioner's job is finished when the charter is ready to be voted on, that the seven current commissioners will not be replacing the supervisors and will not be making up new laws and ordinances, that this is for the people to have a voice in their local government that they do not currently have. Concerned citizen asked about road maintenance. Concerned citizen explained that this isn't Highland versus James City. We will all be affected by this injection well and should all take personal interest in goings on and protect our basic human rights. Concerned citizen asked about districting Highland Township so everyone is represented as they feel that there is no government representation outside of James City. Concerned citizen brought up his concerns about taxes. Minutes from the August 4th, 2016, read by Misty Edinger. John Garris made motion to accept the minutes as read. Bill Edinger seconded. Commissioners voted, it should be July. That's an incorrect date. John Garris made motion to accept the minutes as read. Bill Edinger seconded. Commissioners voted 7 yes, 0 no. Motion passed. Treasurer's report read by Misty Edinger. Bill Edinger made motion to pay the bills. Amy Beer seconded. Commissioners voted 7 yes, 0 no. Motion carried. John Garris made motion to accept the report. Judy Orzetti seconded. Commissioners voted 7 yes, 0 no. Motion carried. Agenda, John Garris made motion to accept the agenda. Bill Edinger seconded. Commissioners voted 7 yes, 0 no. Motion passed. Reminders and announcements. John Garris stated that all Home Rule Study Commission communications are public and discoverable. The Home Rule Study Commission will follow Robert's Rules of Order for conducting meeting minutes and conducting meetings. Old business. Vacancy was officially filled and closed as Judy Orzetti has taken the oath of office for the seat. Discussion was held if commissioners want to rewrite the second-class township code or just add to it in what best fits Highland's needs. Matt Vaughn stated he believes for the most part the code meets most of the needs of Highland Township, but there needs to be some small changes. Commissioners agreed with the discussion on what doesn't work. August schedule was discussed. Misty Edinger made motion to have CELDF representative at all of our August meetings as the commissioners have not gone through this process before. John Gura seconded. Commissioners voted 7 yes, 0 no. Motion passed. Misty Edinger will contact them and coordinate this. New business. Misty Edinger will have copies of the Community Bill of Rights ordinance for Highland Township for everyone who would like to have it as this is public. Final comment period. Concerned citizen asked if he would continue to have 3 supervisors and what their compensation and benefits would be. He raised the question on why taxpayers are paying for health care coverage for them. Concerned citizen asked if we would be able to review the charter before it's in the polls for voting. Commissioners stated that they may possibly do another mailing public hearing so the charter can be voted and nothing will be passed into law without voter approval at the polls. With no other immediate business on the table, Misty Edinger made motion to adjourn the meeting. Amy Beer seconded. Commissioners voted 7 yes, 0 no. Motion carried.
All right, I move to approve the minutes with the revision.
I'll second.
We will now hear the treasurer's report from the secretary.
Sorry, I didn't have that up. Can we come back to that? Can you do your minutes?
Can we come back to that?
Reminders and then.
Okay, yeah. Reminders, all communications are public, and the meeting's conduct is based on Robert's rules.
You're supposed to go slower now.
Sorry.
Don, you can remind people they can watch it on YouTube
Yes, all these meetings are on YouTube,
and the township meeting.
in the township meetings. In fact, I was looking at the page, and it's pretty nice that they're all in order.
Did you ever try to get access to the first, well, I tried to access the first meeting we had in James City. I couldn't get it on YouTube.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody else tried that.
I haven't, they've all played for me fine.
Tom, do you have anything? to say?
I have to do, I haven't accessed it in a while.
Okay.
I'll do that again.
Okay.
For sure.
Check that.
I'm ready.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Treasurer's report, we currently have $46.70 in our kitty. We just got a new donation from Sue, Mary Dean. And our recycling fund has got a new deposit of $38.55.
Make a motion to
Oh.
accept the treasurer's report.
I'll second that motion.
All right, I motion to approve the agenda.
I second it.
All right, for old business, I move we talk about the post-ordinance discussion.
I think we did a lot of that through the public comment. Again, I'll remind everybody if they'd like to see the ordinance that was rescinded recently, there's a copy up here for you to take. It is public knowledge. Please, it's a good way to educate yourself on what we had that we no longer do.
All right, now for new business, we're going to talk about the August schedule.
I think we need more meetings.
I think we do too. If
We're
we're
in
gonna be
crunch
done by
time.
the end of the month, we need more.
Okay, so when would you like to do? When would we like to do those?
We need at least 3 days, so
I did talk to the Karen Republic, and they said for tomorrow, if we want to put something in, it would be in like on Tuesday, next Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Would be the earliest you could put it in.
Wednesday night at
Tuesday.
7 o'clock?
Wednesday?
Because if we have it in Tuesday, it can't be Tuesday night.
Oh, I gotcha.
No, what I'm saying is if we get in a advertisement to them, they want to be able to print it until Tuesday.
Right.
Right,
So we have it
so
in
we can't have
Tuesday,
our
it can't be
meeting till
Tuesday night, we'd
Wednesday.
have to do it at least
Right.
on Wednesday.
Because when you need 3 days for it to be published? Or-
Wouldn't it be good to
Yeah,
keep
it's
it
3
on
days.
Thursdays so that
But we need
Right, we need
extra.
more.
We
We've
need
got
more.
one left.
Yeah, we need more.
You're saying going Tuesday and Thursday, or Wednesday and Thursday?
Wednesday and Thursday, and possibly Friday.
I know.
So it would have to be the 26th, which would be a Friday, would be 3 days after that date.
This would be 3 days after.
Okay, Tuesday's the 23rd. So we need one on the 25th,
26.
and I think we should also have one on the 29th.
Which day is the 29th?
Monday, the following Monday. So it's Thursday, Friday, and Monday.
Be here and here.
It's fine with
You all
me.
good with those days?
It's fine with me.
Sure.
Okay,
Sure.
so 25th and 29th. And then a regular scheduled one
What about, we
is
doing
also on
one
the
here
30th.
also? We doing one here also?
Oh, yeah. We're saying the 26th because the 22nd, remember the 23rd is a Tuesday, so 3 days.
Yeah, but our regular meeting is 25th anyway.
Yeah, we have a meeting on the 25th
Oh,
already.
yeah, okay.
So we'll have one 26th, 29th, and 30th. So we'll meet 4 days in a row,
What
except the
time?
weekend.
Yeah. 7.
7? Okay.
Do we want to
At
have
the
them all at the
township?
township building? Or-
Yeah, I think
I
we
would
should
say
have
that'd
all
be
in-
easiest.
So,
in James City. It's easier because we have technology out there.
yeah,
Our technology is sketchy at best
yes.
anywhere else outside of James City.
Not only that, it's crunch time. I mean,
It is crunch time. We need to be able to access our consultants, you know, whenever we need to. Maybe out there be able to Skype them even if they can't be here.
right.
You know, that way in James City, we have technology where we don't have it in Russell City or Highland.
So,
So my motion is 25th, 26th, 29th.
25th, 26th, 29th?
we would be
25th.
adding the 26th,
Adding,
29th, and 30th.
this is already on there.
The 30th
Oh,
should have already been
wow,
on there.
okay.
We're adding the 25th, 26th, and 29th.
I second your motion.
Thank you. 7 o'clock at the township.
Is that a meeting like this? Is that what you mean?
Mhm.
On next
Yeah.
Thursday, is that right?
August 25th, August 26th, August 29th, and August 30th, all at 7 o'clock at the Highland Township Municipal Building.
Now, will all those dates, if you're gonna put that in,
We're
will
gonna-
all those dates, it will be together?
All in one, yes. One advertisement, yes. And it should be in the paper on Tuesday for you guys. Could you circle those dates too? I mean, there's only 2 days. Right? Okay, are we ready for the next? We ready for next thing?
That's all I had.
Okay. Now we're gonna go on to discussion on the draft charter with Chad Nicholson.
Thank you. Can I join you folks at the table?
Absolutely,
Sure.
please do.
There's even an extra chair back there.
Yeah, we got a chair for you.
Which way do you want to sit?
Just sit up here.
Okay.
So,
Okay, never mind.
just to bring folks up to speed, we had the study process, which you then held a hearing on, presented your findings to the community on the study, basically what you found to be good with the second-class township code and what you found to be deficient with the second-class township code. At the hearing, you voted to move forward with writing the home rule charter in order to remedy the deficiencies that you found in the second-class township code. So, we have been hearing from the Government Study Commission members about the things that you want to change or that you want written into a charter, and based on that information, we at the Legal Defense Fund have come up with a draft for you folks to peruse and look over tonight. It's going to take a little bit of time to look through it. I'm going to explain it, talk about how we structured it. Ultimately, it's going to be up to you to decide what you like, what you don't like, if you want more things put in, taken out, but tonight we do have a draft to present to you. when we're ready, in probably just a couple of minutes, we will get Natalie Long and Thomas Linzey, two self attorneys, on the phone as well, so they can handle legal questions from you folks with any of the provisions and stuff like that. What I wanted to start with, does that sound all right?
Yeah.
Folks?
Yeah.
Okay. What I wanted to start with first was the basic list of topics that we heard from you folks in terms of what you wanted changed or altered with the charter. You'll notice that this, as well as the draft charter that we have for you folks tonight as well, is labeled privileged at the top. This is draft stuff. It is between us and you folks at this point. It's not to say it can't be accessed by the public, but our advice is that if anybody does want copies of these things, that they make a written request to the Government Study Commission, and then you can get them something. But we don't have drafts to... wow, very exciting. We don't have drafts to hand out to the public tonight. If folks do want a draft or they do want a copy of this stuff, they can make a written request to you folks, is our advice. So I just wanted to run through quickly what we heard in terms of what you folks wanted to include in the Home Rule Charter or deal with regarding the second-class township code. We'd heard that you wanted a Bill of Rights for township residents, similar to what was in the injection well ordinance. That you wanted limitations on property tax increases, making sure that those couldn't be raised willy-nilly or past what the state allows.
That is correct.
A mechanism, and we're going to look through how this stuff is actually in the charter. I'm just running through the list right now so you guys get a sense of what we've been working off of and what we've been researching. A mechanism to ensure budget adoption in case one fails to be adopted. Potential districting of elected officials. We heard that at the last meeting. Vacancies, what to do in the event of a vacancy on the supervisor board, how is that filled? Terms of office, how long are the terms? Restrictions, potential restrictions on supervisor health insurance, recall or impeachment provisions, prohibition on injection well, prohibition on privatization of water, initiative referendum, charter amendment, town meeting. We heard some discussion around that. We'll explain some of that tonight as well.
Excuse me, this is... Hello, Natty. Hello?
Hi, is this Misty?
This is Misty.
Hi, Misty, this is Natalie. Can you hear me?
I can, Natalie. You were on speakerphone?
Okay. Just a second, I'll merge the call and...
Do you want to actually give her like 5 minutes and just introduce, unless she can stay on, but it doesn't need to be at this point.
Misty, can you hear me
Well,
still?
yep, hold on a minute. Chad said if you want to stay on the line, you can, but we'll be ready for you in...
I'm here. All right. Good to go?
Chad said we'll be ready for you in just a few more minutes.
Okay. Sounds good. We'll see you in a sec.
So those were the topics that we've been researching based on what we heard from you folks, and those are ones that we put placeholders into the draft charter for you tonight to review and look at. We'll present some of the research on the things, whether we think it's viable, a good idea, potentially not, and so our attorneys will speak to those questions. But those are the things that we have put into the draft. Other stuff that we had heard says for further consideration there was potential issues regarding the fire department, whether, if there's a viable fire department, if it can be shut down, things like that. We're going to need more information from you folks on what you want there if you do want that. Supervisor salaries, and citizen enforcement of local laws. So those are the things that we will be discussing tonight as well, and that are not currently in the charter. Does anybody, and you folks may develop other things to add to this list tonight or in the future, just in understanding that at this point, beginning basically at the last hearing, which was I think July 30th, you've got 9 months to write the charter according to state law. So you can take up to 9 months to do this thing. I know there's been discussion about getting it put up for a vote in November. As you understand, you're up against crunch time at this point because basically the drop dead date for finalizing the charter is going to be August 30th in order to get it finalized and presented to the Board of Elections, and there's a bunch of other procedural stuff that goes along with that. So you may identify the things you want more research and stuff done. We will do our best, but we're getting, from our perspective as well, depending on the depth of the research that's needed, it could be limited in terms of what we can provide if you want it voted on for this fall. It's just an understanding that stuff that you may want further research on, we're running up against time constraints. It's all up to you, just letting you know the lay of the land. Any questions on this sheet before we get into looking at the charter? Okay. I'm going to pass out a draft of the charter. And just to reiterate what it is that you're writing, it's not like a local ordinance. This isn't just an ordinance that's about burn barrels or anything like this. A charter is actually a local constitution. It represents a change in government for your municipality. So if you write this charter and if it gets adopted by a majority of the voters in the township, you're no longer Highland Township second-class township. You would become Highland Township home rule municipality, which has greater powers and authorities under state law. So you're actually changing the form of governance with this charter. You're no longer Highland Township second-class township. You could go as far as actually You could go as far as actually changing the name of the township if you wanted. It could be called the Highland Sportsman Club Township if you wanted. I mean, that's representing that you're actually creating a new frame and form of government. This isn't just an ordinance. It's representing a new constitution for the people. So I want to be clear that this isn't just a small thing. It's actually representing a new type of government for the community. With that in mind, the charters are often structured more like constitutions. So if you look at the state or the federal constitutions, they often begin with the Bill of Rights. That's how we began the draft of your charter as well, based on feedback from you folks. So you have like a Bill of Rights. If you think of the Pennsylvania Constitution as well, it then lays out how the government's going to operate, what the elected officials' positions are, what types of things are prohibited, how things are enforced, a whole variety of things. So we laid out the draft charter on the basis of how other constitutions are drafted as well. That's the DNA of it. So, you know, it's got a Bill of Rights at the beginning. It talks about the powers of the municipality, the governing body, what prohibitions there are, potential provisions like town meeting, those types of things. So we're going to run through the charter in a bit more detail here in a second, but just wanted to lay out that you're actually proposing with this a change in form of government, and that the charter itself represents a form of local constitution, and that's how we drafted it as such. Does anybody have any questions on that before we start taking a look at it? Okay. So, you can probably follow along as well with that sheet I just handed you, because that in some ways mirrors the order that we put the topics that you presented into the charter. Do we still have the attorneys on, or did they? Okay.
Are you still there? Natalie?
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. Are you still there?
I thought she said she'd call back.
Yep, they're still there.
Just can't hear anything, but we are here.
Okay.
Said they can't hear anything?
You want to sit closer to that possibly, or have that moved over here?
I'm afraid to move it.
You move it, you're gonna lose service.
Natalie, can you hear me when I speak?
Somewhat. I heard you just ask that question, but maybe if there's a way to move the phone closer to you when you're speaking, that's good.
Hey, guys.
It's easier to move the body than it is the phone.
Move that over there too.
Okay, Natalie and Thomas, we just went through the overview of what a charter is and what a home rule municipality means, and we're now going to get into the substance of the draft charter and run through some of the provisions. Can you hear me right now?
Okay, we talked some of that, that you just went through the distinction between a home rule municipality and the distinction between an ordinance and a charter, and then what was the second part of that?
Then I asked if you could hear me. Great. Okay, so running through the draft charter, you can see Article 1 is the Bill of Rights, and that lays out most of the rights that were in the original Highland Township injection well ordinance. There are a couple of new ones that we've added based on stuff that we have learned over the past couple of years in litigation. I'm not going to run through all of the language right now. I think it'd be good for you folks to take this home with you and read it in depth between now and the next meeting and look at the language, ask questions, but I don't think it would be a great use of time to actually look at all of the language tonight. But we will go through some of the headings and what it means. So you can see Section 101, that's governmental legitimacy. It talks about legitimate governments owing their existence to the people of the communities that they serve. Basically saying we have governments in order to protect our rights and to serve the people of the community that those governments are within. 102 is the right of local community self-government. That was the linchpin of the injection well ordinance, basically saying that you folks have the right to determine your community's future, that you have a right to do so. Section 103 is building on that, the right to exercise the right of self-government. That talks about how you may go about exercising your right to govern your community. Again, moving through these things quite quickly so we can get into the substantive provisions, but just going over these in broad strokes. Section 104, right to clean air, water, and soil. That was also a right that was in the previous ordinance in Highland Township, talking about the residents here having a right to clean air, to clean water, to clean soil. Section 105, rights of ecosystems and natural communities. That was also in the injection well ordinance. It talks about the ecosystems themselves as having rights to be enforced. There was in the former lawsuit a provision whereby the Crystal Spring ecosystem made a motion to intervene. So it may sound a little weird, and it's actually going on in Grant Township as well. But that's why the language is in here, is to give more protections and abilities to protect the environment within the charter in the township. Section 106 is the right to a sustainable energy future. That was also in the Highland Township ordinance, talking about what it is that you're looking for in the future, that you're intending at some point to have clean sources of energy, and that gives you the right to actually have clean sources of energy in the future, and to prohibit ones that may be harming your rights. Section 107 is a relatively new one, and this is based on some of the provisions that you mentioned to us, and we want to see if this is actually what you're going for, and then we had some legal commentary as well. So Section 107 says the right to be fairly taxed. All residents of Highland Township possess a right to be fairly taxed. Protection of that right means that rates of taxation for residents and non-residents shall not exceed the rates allowable under state law, in particular the Local Tax Enabling Act and the Second-Class Township Code. So it's basically saying that any tax increases levied by, say, the supervisors can't exceed those by state law, making sure that the charter is in alignment with that. Is that in line with what you folks were asking? Does that sound?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Any alterations on that or suggestions, or is that similar to what you were hoping for?
What would the Local Tax Enabling Act in the Second-Class Township Code, what, does that limit the rates to, or?
Yeah,
Okay.
it lays out what they are.
Okay.
We did have some stuff to add to that. Natalie, did you want to piggyback on any of that regarding the taxation right? Natalie?
Are you still there?
I think we lost you there, but I heard you ask.
Okay.
Was Jeff putting the question to us?
Yes, we're at section 107 in the charter, the right to be fairly taxed. I went through what the language was that we put in there, and it does sound like it's in line with what the Government Study Commission was asking, but I know that we had some commentary and some background to offer as well, so.
Can't hear you, Jeff.
Yeah, we're getting like every other word or a sentence out of four kind of thing.
Okay, I mean, I'm sitting right next to the phone, speaking into it like a madman. Okay, we're at section 107 of the charter on the fairly taxed amendment, and we just went through, I went through the language, read it through, and it does sound like it's in line with what the study commissioners were asking, but I do know that we had some commentary to offer on that from a legal perspective, so I'm turning it to you folks now.
Sure. I think I understood what it was that you were asking. Let me see if this is correct. You went through section 107, the right to be fairly taxed, and you did mention that you've done some research with some possible commentary. If that is correct, I'll go ahead and keep on going without me if that's wrong. I think the thing that we were wanting to confirm was making sure that our understanding first of how we were interpreting what people were saying was in fact correct. And that this language represents what people are hoping to achieve in this area with the Home Rule Charter. Is that a correct understanding of what people were wanting?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Thomas, did you have some thoughts to add on to that?
Closer to the one.
I think Natalie put her finger on it, which was essentially we're trying to narrow down exactly what you want to accomplish in this particular provision. And research is mostly focused on Section 2901 of the Home Rule statutes, which established that as a home rule community, you can't have a rate of taxation that you can't create new subjects of taxation under the Home Rule statute.
Right.
And our understanding of the inclusion of this particular provision is mostly typically concerned about creation of new subjects of taxation or new rates of taxation. And something you can't do under 2901 anyway, but including the language I think allays people's concerns that the home rule charter would somehow be used to circumvent those provisions or to put higher tax rates or create a subject for taxation for the home rule charter. So again, it's not narrowing down exactly what you want to accomplish with this provision, and with an understanding that there are certain things you can't do about tax rates anyway under the home rule statute. But putting this provision in essentially, cuts off that argument from opponents that the charter would be used to try to do something along those lines.
Good, that's what we wanted.
Does that help answer the question, Chuck?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Yes.
That's what-
Any
that's
other
what we
questions?
wanted.
Okay. Okay, that appears to be satisfactory over here. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
I'm going to move on with the Bill of Rights at this point. Section 108 is the right to intervene. As you folks know, in the recent decision, or in the recent case, the judge did at one point deny intervention for the water authority, for the citizens group, as well as for the ecosystem. So this
Excuse
is...
me a minute, I've got a major problem. Did anybody turn the water on in the pit tonight?
Yeah.
Yes,
We got a major water leak out
Well, we
there.
can just
Yes.
shut it off. Nobody can use the
It's full of
restroom.
water.
yes, I noticed that when I turned it
It's
on.
full of water.
Yeah,
Get a hold of John, would you please, and have him come down. and
Well,
do
Jim, it
something.
does.
I don't have his number.
yeah, I noticed.
I don't
Water's
have.
running down there like a son of a gun. No, we're gonna be out of water
Bill.
real quick.
Go
I'll
shut it
turn
off.
I noticed that
We're
when I
really
turned
low
it
in
on,
town.
it was full of water.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
We continue on.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. And then section 109 is the rights as self-executing, basically saying that you don't need further laws in place for these rights to be enforceable and to be protected in your community. So a lot of times, say at the state level, there might be a right to the Article 1, Section 27, the Environmental Rights Amendment. The legislature has to pass more laws in order to make that real. This is saying that your Bill of Rights is self-executing, that you don't need further legislation in order to have these rights protected. A question on this is whether or not you wanted these rights to be limited to only the prohibitions, which in this case is regarding the injection well, or whether you want these rights to be broad in general for the all township residents. Basically, the question is, do you want these rights to be freestanding, or do you want them applied only to the prohibitions on things like the injection well?
Well, do the attorneys have something that they could say with the pros and cons of
Sure.
ordinance?
Natalie?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, so we're on section 109, the rights as self-executing, and we're discussing whether or not to tailor the rights just to the prohibitions, such as the injection well, or whether to leave them as broad rights. And they were asking for further clarification on the differences or advantages or disadvantages of each.
Sure. I'll go ahead and offer a few thoughts and then ask if Tom wants to jump in. I think it probably depends on what folks are hoping to, what they're hoping to do with the charter and how broad sweeping they want something like this to be. There are a couple of different considerations to take into mind, namely if you want the charter to be very narrowly tailored regarding certain concerns that the township has, or if you want it to be more broad sweeping and be something that can be used and adapted and tailored as time goes on. Those are considerations that I think are probably something that you folks have more of a sense of as to what makes sense for your community in terms of how focused you want it to be or how broad you want to leave it open for further on down the road. Thomas, do you have any thoughts to add on to that?
No, I mean, just to bring it down to a practical level, let's use Section 401, which is the depositing of waste from oil and gas extraction, which is the prohibition on depositing of any waste within Highland Township by any corporation or government of waste resulting from oil and gas extraction. The question for you folks on this broad or narrow interpretation, which we're talking about right now, is whether something like Section 104 could be used to apply against someone in the community who is polluting the water with some kind of chlorine product, or a company company that wants to use something and then dump it into the soil within Highland Township, let's say some kind of PCBs or whatever is being put into the soil. Whether you want that provision, Section 104, to be applicable against other things other than the prohibition on depositing of waste from oil and gas extraction. In other words, do you want to tie it directly to the prohibition and only have the right be operable? In other words, the right be enforceable against that particular prohibition? Or do you want to unhook it from those prohibitions and make it generally applicable? And again, under Section 104, generally applicable would allow you to apply that right to almost anything that would threaten that right within the municipality. However, if you hook it to the prohibition, the only thing that it can be used against is those things that are prohibited within the municipality. So it's a key question because one path goes towards that narrow interpretation of only being able to use the right to that specific prohibition. The other path leads to a much broader area in which you're opening up the Bill of Rights for enforcement against all kinds of things that would threaten the right, but are not buried within the particular prohibition section. So that's the decision that has to be made, and not unusual that we're here because in all the ordinances that we draft, that decision has to be made as well about how broad you want it applied versus how narrow you want it applied.
Even if we let it,
Are there any follow-up questions to that, Chair?
Yep, just a second.
the question I would have, now later on, if we wanted to reattach it, if we just kept it the broad, narrow band, we can always go back in, the citizens could go back in and we could open this up again, correct?
The question is if they left it broad right now, could they go back in and tailor it later?
Yes. There's an amendment process for home rule charters that's written out in the home rule code. There's a certain time period in which you have to wait in order to be able to amend a home rule charter. But if it's something that you wanted to down the line do, you can go in once the home rule charter is passed and enacted. There's an amendment process for citizens to go about doing that.
And I have a question too. He was talking about, Mr. Linzey was talking about if somebody were to put like PCBs into the ground, it would have to be something that our township prohibits as well. There's something like that.
The question is if, to use the PCBs example, in order to use that right, would it have to be something that the township prohibits as well?
Could you say that question again? I'm not sure that I understood it.
Yeah, the question was, and to take the PCBs example, if the right was going to be enforced against that, would the township have to have a specific prohibition against it?
I think I see what you're saying. Thomas, do you want to jump in and I'll see if I'm understanding something different?
Yeah, the answer is no. So if you unhook it and so decide that the Bill of Rights should be the Bill of Rights should be the Bill of Rights, in other words, it should be the plan, the framework, without being hooked or anchored or minimized into a prohibition in the charter, then essentially what you're saying is that there may be some things that are legal to do, like the dumping of sewage sludge within the municipality, for example, but which may violate a right that you have within the Bill of Rights, in which case the township would then enforce this right, or a resident of the township could enforce this right against that dumping in that particular example. So this is the entire choice here, which is in the first case, the very narrow one, you would need a prohibition in place to be able to invoke these rights. So without something being prohibited within the municipality, you can't invoke these rights to try to stop that activity from taking place. If you want to broaden it out, it means unhooking it from the prohibition and actually having that right freestanding, which means it can be used against anything that may violate that right, regardless of whether a prohibition appears in the charter or not. And that's why this is a fairly major decision, because one path means a very narrow reading of the charter, so the rights are only triggered by the prohibition and can only act in concert with them, versus the broader one, which is unanchoring it from the prohibition so that it can be applied against anything that may violate it, regardless of whether the prohibition specifically is within the charter or not.
Okay. So what I think,
Any more follow-up questions, Chair?
I think they were discussing just a second.
but what I think they're trying to say is, basically, if it's broad, then we can, protect our water and, whatever, through having that right,
Right.
as opposed to just having it just
That's what
injection
I'm
wells.
thinking too.
Yes. A lot of the conversations about in other communities is having it broader allows it to be applied to more things that sometimes during the public education process, folks say, well, does that mean that anybody can then sue anybody? Like if you don't like what your neighbor's doing with, having paint cans out there or something, can they then enforce that right? So folks sometimes have concerns that it's going to open up a Pandora's box. We haven't seen that happen, but that's sometimes a concern that people have, is that's going to allow people to use these things against anybody. We haven't seen it happen, but that is a concern that folks raise with that.
Okay, so like, for example, if, last time at a township meeting, somebody mentioned about somebody's oil and burning styrofoam. That could be, something that is brought up to, okay.
I think,
So I'm thinking that, maybe the narrower tailored for now, yeah.
I'm definitely in favor of the narrow.
I agree with the narrow, because our purpose isn't to stop industry coming into Highland Township.
Right.
And if we leave it broad, it could effectively
too.
stop industry, anything. I mean, waste could be wood chips that's sitting in somebody's, sawmill backyard. And we don't want to stop industry from Highland Township. We want Highland Township to thrive, prosper, and hopefully grow. And I think if we broaden that out, we might limit our growing capability.
And if something does come up where it is interfered with Highland Township, we could always go back and adjust it again. We can always go back and adjust it. The people can go back and adjust it.
So I think we all say, tailored.
I mean, do we want to, is this something that we should make a vote on? Where we can wait?
You can, because you're going to take this home and read through some of the details, and you're not voting on the final charter tonight, but it does seem like there's a general.
Yeah.
And I think a lot more discussion should be maybe held on this, so we can figure out what the yin and yang is to this whole question. I hate to make a decision in a 10-minute time frame when I should be thinking about it and sleeping on it and chewing on it to make sure that nothing, I'm not going to prohibit something that we would possibly use in the future to grow with.
I agree with that.
Natalie, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so we just finished up the Bill of Rights section. Did you want to add any commentary on the Bill of Rights in general?
Sorry, did I want to what?
Add any commentary on the Bill of Rights in general?
If there aren't any other questions, we can go ahead and move on. If there are questions that come up regarding it, feel free to ask.
Okay. So did folks
Natalie,
have
if I could.
Go ahead.
This is Thomas. I caught the last part of Misty's comment. It is the right conversation to have, the one that you guys are playing around with, what the impact and the explication of this would be. The only other flip side to keep in mind also is that you may have something that comes into the township or wants to come into the township that you don't have a specific prohibition embedded within the charter to deal with. And to amend the charter takes a while. So there may be some lag time there. It's just another factor to consider. And again, in our municipalities, basically they're split 50-50 on a broader, narrow interpretation. But as you guys are processing this out, deciding which direction you want to go, I would keep that in mind as one of the considerations as well, that there may be something that comes in that you don't want, but you can't use the charter and can't use the rights if you've written it narrowly because the prohibitions may not include that specific activity. And so again, that's not to counsel you to go one way or the other, but just to say that that might be a criteria to keep in mind with the others as you guys make that decision.
All right.
So we didn't read all of the language in the Bill of Rights, and understand you folks will be doing that over the next week before the next meeting. Are there any other questions, concerns, additions, subtractions, things that come up for you at this point before we move on the Bill of Rights section?
Nothing for me.
Okay. Article 2, general powers of the municipality. This lays out some of the logistics of operating, what it means. So Section 201, status and title. This is, and you can change this if you want, but this is where it says Highland Township will still be known as Highland Township Home Rule Municipality. Section 202 is boundaries. We haven't heard anything changing on that, so it's still the same boundaries of the township. Section 203 is the rules of operation. This gets to a couple of questions that came up tonight. The language currently says, unless expanded or altered as provided by this charter, the rules of operation for the Highland Township Home Rule Municipal Corporation shall be the ones provided to second-class townships pursuant to the second-class township code of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So it's basically keeping as the default your current second-class township code unless it's altered or amended by this charter specifically. So we'd heard that you folks wanted to mostly keep it the same except for some specific things which we're adding in, but that would be the default unless it's changed or altered in here. Is that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. 204, repeals. Just says that any inconsistent laws already on the books that are inconsistent with this charter are repealed to the extent to bring them in alignment with the charter, because the charter would then take precedent. 205, legal claims and liabilities of the township. Basically saying that the township shall continue to own, possess, and control all legal claims, power, and property controlled by it prior to when this charter takes effect. Section 206, pending and past actions and proceedings. I'm going to turn it over to the lawyers for some commentary here. Natalie and Thomas, we're at section 206. Did you folks want to introduce that or offer anything here?
Sure, I'd be happy to. This section, I think, is especially relevant for folks in Highland Township right now in light of the recent consent decree that happened between the township and the oil company with the injection well. So I wanted to take a moment to talk a little bit about what the consent decree actually is and how it does not apply to the Government Study Commission or the Home Rule Charter. Does that sound like a good idea for folks? Does that sound like a thing that people would like to talk about?
Yes, please.
Yeah, just tell me if their head's nodding.
Yes.
Please.
Yes, they're not.
Lots of nodding.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so it's worth understanding before I dive into anything about the consent decree, understanding what a consent decree actually is. Because I think that's something that a lot of people probably don't understand, even what it actually means. A consent decree in the world of the law is basically a private agreement between two parties. So it's not actually a substantive decision that the judge made. It's better to think of it like a contract. The court basically says, you two are two consenting adults, you can do what you want, and you hereby put a stamp on it. So it's a private agreement, and because it's a private agreement, the parties themselves can actually modify the agreement, which is something you can't do with the judicial ruling. So with the consent decree that was recently issued, the court didn't actually make a ruling. It basically pulled out its rubber stamp and said, okay, this paperwork was fine, you guys have entered into a contract, you can do that, full steam ahead for the both of you. So the role of the court in approving a consent decree is not actually to decide if the consent decree is feasible or workable or even a good idea. It basically just checks to make sure that the parties aren't doing anything illegal, puts a stamp on it, and moves on. So does that make sense to folks in terms of what a consent decree actually is? It's not a judgment. Is that clear to folks?
Now it is, yeah.
Yeah, now it is.
Okay, good. So in reviewing the consent decree on top of it, the consent decree that the township and the company signed doesn't bind the Government Study Commission from moving forward with its work or drafting the Home Rule Charter. It's something that applies between those two parties regarding the ordinance that the township just rescinded, not to the Home Rule Charter or the work of the Government Study Commission and the Commission. Of course, that's something that can always be challenged by anyone. The saying is like anyone can sue anybody for anything at any time, anywhere, right? But the consent decree does not apply to the Government Study Commission and the Home Rule process and the drafting of the charter. And so this language in Section 206 is intended to reinforce that and to highlight that. Thomas, did you have anything else that you wanted to say to that regard?
No, I think on the law, that's a perfect explanation. I would also add that we have to keep in mind that the township supervisors have a vested interest in trying to make the consent decree something that it isn't. And so I know that there's been some information floating around from some of the supervisors in the township. The reason for that is that it's not in their interest for a charter to be written that reimposes the injection well ban, because the township itself is going to be the one that's sued again by Seneca over that injection well ban if Seneca still wants to continue putting in the injection well and operating it within the township. So the supervisors understand that, you know, if the people of the township of Highland put in those provisions into the charter, that the township is the one that's going to be defending the law of the township. And that's something that the supervisors don't necessarily want. They don't want to be in that position. So it's in their best interest, it's in their vested interest to actually try to make the consent decree something that it isn't. And so along those lines, there will be probably misinformation put out by the supervisors about what the consent decree actually means. In addition, it is in Seneca's best interest, their vested interest, to actually make the consent decree something that it isn't either. Because the more pressure Seneca can put on the Government Study Commission and hoping that these provisions don't become reinstated within the charter itself, that it's in the interest of the corporation to try to expand out what the consent decree is, even though the consent decree is not what they will be expanding it out to be. So I think in addition to the law, which Natalie put perfectly, that the consent decree is essentially a contract, it's not a decision by the board, and certainly doesn't bind the Government Study Commission, that you're going to hear a lot of other misinformation about what its status is from both the township supervisors as well as from the corporation, simply because it's in their vested interest to actually try to blow it up to be something that it is not.
Any questions on this section?
No, he summed it up pretty good.
Yeah, it's already begun as well.
He summed that up
Yeah,
pretty
it's
good.
already
The misinformation.
Okay, so are folks content with this section, the language that's there and the explanation that's been offered?
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay. Okay, section 207, continuation of ordinances. This just basically says that all existing ordinances, resolutions, rules continue in effect unless they are otherwise repealed or altered by this charter. Section 208, this is another addition here based on a suggestion that we had heard from the Government Study Commission regarding the adoption of a budget. It says the Board of Supervisors shall be required to adopt a budget, and this is up for you folks to decide if this is the language that you want, for the township. In the event of a vacancy on the Board of Supervisors such that the supervisors are unable to reach agreement on a budget, the budget from the previous year shall serve as the operating budget until a new supervisor takes office and a budget is approved. Is that in line with what the suggestion or the concern was?
Yes,
Mine is, yes.
yes. That was my concern. That's what brought that up. I brought that up because I was worried that they'd shut down the township because they can't decide. They have troubles making decisions. They have a history of troubles making decisions. And I'm just thinking that's one more decision that they may not be able to make in the future, that we need to make the decision for them, show them how to make the decision.
I don't know how we could broaden it, because one of my problems right now is where we were supposed to be broke, but we somehow found $4,000 mysterious dollars to pay a lawyer to do something that most places want done. I don't know if we could add anything to that. It's something we should talk about. But you can shift money around inside the budget, even though that was a line item expense at zero. We budgeted $0 for a lawyer, but somehow we found $4,000 to do what they did.
What he's asking about is, can we limit the amount of money that they can repurpose?
That they can shift in their working budget.
So, the question on the budget provision in section 208, Natalie and Thomas, is whether there can be limitations on how money is reallocated or shifted within the budget. I don't know if we have an analysis on that at this point, or if we would need to do more research.
A question like that I'd want to research before answering Tom's specific.
I agree with Natalie. I would say the provisions that are here, we found nothing in the home rule statutes or other enabling laws that would prevent the Government Study Commission from doing what the intent of this provision currently is. But if you want to expand it out, we're going to have to do some more looking to make sure on specific questions that we're giving you the right advice.
I mean, and that's something we need to talk about. I'm sorry for bringing that up. It was just one of my questions. It's something that was kind of bugging me, what happened at the last township meeting. Thank you.
So just if it is something that you folks want more discussion on, recognizing that we would have to do more research if you want it, and, you know, always you have the ability to amend it later on if it's something you wanted to do as well. Does the language as it currently sits meet the original concern, and is that something that you folks are comfortable with?
I'm comfortable with it.
Okay.
How about you? Anybody?
Yep.
Matt, you were saying that was, they had on the line item, it was 0 for lawyers?
It's something we need to talk, not, because we got so much to cover, it's something.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the suggestion on that is for you folks to think on that and bring it to the next meeting for more discussion. So if you have suggestions on what that might look like as well, and then we can research it. Article 3, the governing body. So basically this is referring to the people making decisions in the township, your board of supervisors. Section 301, our understanding is that you wanted to keep the board of supervisors and keep it at 3 supervisors. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Section 302 regarding districts. This was some research we had started to look into based on the previous meeting you had, where there was a suggestion made about having supervisors represented from the 3 parts of Highland Township as it's understood: James City, Russell City, and the township, I guess. Highland Corners. So we looked into what that would mean legally, and we had some research we wanted to present. Thomas and Natalie, we're at section 302. Do you guys want to give our analysis of what's going on with districting?
Sure. With districting, and I'll talk about a couple of points, and then I'll pass it over to Thomas. We had a chance to look into the question of districting. The process itself is fairly difficult, rather complex, and rather uncertain in some areas of the law. So our opinion or our recommendation would be that the Government Study Commission avoid delving into districting, because if you do write something in, there's nothing guaranteeing that you're actually acting within your scope of authority that we found. Thomas, do you want to jump in with some thoughts?
Yeah, so this has become our favorite part of the Home Rule Charter. It's what eats up the most hours at this point. And the reason for the difficulty and the complexity of the districting issue is that the Home Rule Charter itself seems to explicitly recognize that a home rule township can engage in changing the election district to create supervisors that are elected from those districts rather than at an at-large election. And right now, the situation is, of course, you have 3 supervisors who are elected at-large. This change would change most likely 2 of those from being at-large to being elected by district. The problem emerges because whereas the Home Rule Charter explicitly recognizes the ability, references the ability of a home rule township to actually have supervisors that are elected by district, there is no law that we can find which actually spells out how to implement that shift. And that's what's giving rise to the issue right now, which is, it's one thing to create districts, it's a whole other thing to create districts that are constitutional and legal. And in essence, that means generally in the law that when you create new voting districts, they have to be equal or as close to equal as possible in representation. So obviously you don't want a township that creates an election district with 5 voters in it and then another election district with 1,000 voters in it. So even though technically you could put that on paper, it doesn't mean it's constitutional or legal, which can give rise to challenges based on the fact that those election districts are not equal and therefore not constitutional. The other provision that we've come across seems to allow new election districts only to be created through the action of your county court of common pleas. That the court of common pleas actually is the one that divvies up whole districts into sub-election districts or changes the districts. And there's only two ways that that can happen under the Elections Code in Pennsylvania. One is through the County Board of Elections asking the Court of Common Pleas to make a change. And the second provision is that 20 voters, at least 20 voters within Highland Township would have to petition the Court of Common Pleas to actually change the election districts within the township. So there is a process for that petitioning to take place. The problem occurs in that if you write a home rule charter with districting in it and attempt to separate up those districts, that, as Natalie mentioned, not only could you be giving rise to legal challenge from someone who loses, so someone who runs in one of those districts and loses, and then says, well, these districts aren't legal anyway, and so I'm going to sue the township to try to overturn the districts and therefore get rid of my loss and put me in a position where I can not only seek to win the seat, but also throw out the entire election framework that the government, that the Home Rule Charter has instituted. So it's like a worst-case scenario, a nuclear bomb being dropped in the middle of the charter and blowing into smithereens because the entire election schedule and frame that's been put into the Home Rule Charter is found to be unconstitutional and illegal. So we've been balancing a bunch of those options out and looking at the law and have come up with three options, and we think that these three are equal possibilities. But again, the legal team has come down on the suggestion or recommendation that you not do districts because of the problems inherent in any kind of lawsuit, constitutionality, lack of implementation language in the law. Having said that, there are three choices. The first option is do nothing, which means just to default back to the three at-large supervisors. So you continue to maintain your current form of government. You'd have three supervisors. They would all be elected at large. So the first option is the do nothing option, which defaults back to that status of your supervisors and the at-large election. The second option that we've developed is almost a do-it-all option, which says we should use the charter to script out to the minute detail which districts you want, which supervisors are to be elected by district, and which ones at large. Choosing the election cycle in which that would be staggered in, identifying those staggered elections about who's being elected when within the district, essentially define the entire process within the charter down to the smallest detail, essentially assuming that the Home Rule Charter can do that, and assuming that you have the authority to actually just write the process into the charter. The third option is a middle ground, which is to put in the bare bones of what you want. In other words, identify the districts themselves and maybe some language about staggered terms, and then put a sentence or two that directs the County Board of Elections and the Court of Common Pleas to actually make it real. So, in other words, on the third option, you'd be laying out a plan, like a future vision, and then directing the County Board of Elections and the Court of Common Pleas to take whatever steps necessary to actually make that process real. So, again, those are the three options, and we arrive at this point because the law is frightfully unclear on implementation, while recognizing the authority of the township, of the Home Rule Charter to do it. There's no real implementation language about how to do it, and so the three options are, first option is do nothing, which defaults back to the three at-large supervisors. The second option is to do it all, which means scripting it all out within the Home Rule Charter, and then possibly anticipating a challenge to some of that down the road. And the third one is what I would call middle ground, which is put the bare bones of what you want of the plan, and then have provisions that direct the County Board of Elections and the Court of Common Pleas to recognize what you've written and actually take whatever steps they need to do to make it official. But I think those are the three options that we've arrived at.
Questions on that or discussion?
Yeah, we should leave it.
I think our work's too important. I think we should leave it alone.
Yeah, I do too.
Leave it alone.
I think we should leave it alone.
Mhm.
general consensus
Yeah,
is
just leave it.
is to go with our legal advice and drop that districting.
Yeah.
I mean, if people want representation in Highland Corners and Russell City, they
can-
should run for supervisor.
Right.
Okay. Any other discussion on that or questions? Okay.
Chad, if I can add one more thing,
Yeah.
which is that process for divvying up election districts would allow people within Highland, if you wanted to pursue a districting strategy, to actually do it after the adoption of the Home Rule Charter. So it's a process unknown to us. It's the first time I had seen it, but it allows 20 more electors within Highland to actually petition the Court of Common Pleas to divide up the election districts within the township. So just because you may not decide to do the districting within the Home Rule Charter, there is an option to actually pursue, depending on how much you want to pursue it, outside the Home Rule Charter to actually get the election district divvied up. And there is a process identified for that. So if you decide not to do districting, it doesn't mean you're throwing in the towel. It just means that you may just wait and use the other process to do that.
Thank you. Section 303, this is vacancies. There seemed to be a big concern about how vacancies on the Board of Supervisors are filled. It says,
Get up and walk around a little bit.
It says, if a vacancy occurs on the Board of Supervisors, the remaining supervisors may appoint a successor who is an elector of Highland Township and has resided continuously for at least 1 year. Upon their failure to make the appointment within 30 days after the vacancy occurs, the vacancy shall be filled at the next available primary, municipal, or general election in accordance with the regular election procedures, provided there has been time for the completion of such election procedures. Is that...
Yep.
That's what you
Yep.
want.
My only question with that is, this is upon their failure. We also want, even if, Joe and Curly appoint Mo, we want also in the general election to be able to vote for Mo ourselves.
So you, regardless, even if the supervisors agree on the third supervisor to be appointed, you would rather have
not
that
gonna-
seat remain vacant until the next
Not
election?
completely vacant. They will take that seat until the
next
next general
election.
election. Or the next election.
Okay.
But, so that term won't be the if Mo is no longer a supervisor 5, months after he's in there, then they appoint somebody, and then that next supervisor will be in there for, 3.5 years. No, we want, if someone's going to fill out a term, that person needs to be elected, never appointed. He can be appointed until the next election.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Okay.
Is there still a desire to have a vacancy board in the way that there currently is right now, or would you rather have the default process be what you're describing?
I think I'd rather have the
Default
default process, what
process.
we're
Yeah.
describing,
I do too.
because the vacancy board is appointed by the supervisors, so they can effectively corner the market on it. And that's what we're trying to get rid of.
Yep. Okay, Natalie and Thomas, we're on section 303 with vacancies. It sounds like the language that we had drafted up is similar, but with another caveat, which is that even if the supervisors are able to agree on an appointment, that the recommendation is that that appointment only exists until the next election, at which point the new supervisor would be elected, a new supervisor would be elected at that point. So no appointment process, even if the supervisors can agree on the appointment, would actually allow an appointed supervisor to finish out the term. That would just be an acting supervisor until the next available election. So that's some of the discussion happening over here. Did you guys want to add anything on the vacancy process?
Yeah, one thing to add, we did some research on this question, and whatever the formulation is, how to actually go about filling vacancies ends up looking like. It's worth noting there's nothing, we searched through, and we can't find anything in the statute or in the case law that prohibits you from setting up your own vacancy procedure. So it looks like you can do that. However, I would offer that with the caveat that just because there's nothing in the statute or the case law against setting up a vacancy procedure, that doesn't mean it couldn't be something that is subject to a legal challenge down the road. So the way something like that arises if a vacancy is actually filled in accordance with a vacancy filling procedure that the Home Rule Charter lays out. And someone, that vacancy is filled, and then someone comes along and wants to contest how that seat was filled. This could be a point of contention and give rise to a legal challenge. So it's something for, I think, the Government Study Commission to balance in terms of how much you want to have your own procedure to fill vacancies versus any sort of risks that might come along because of possible litigation down the road. Thomas, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I would just add that, the sub point I would add to all that is that, home rule charters have not been used creatively in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. That most of the home rule charters out there do very little that's novel or has what hasn't been done before, so they're very conservative. And a lot have been, this is one area where people have toyed around with vacancy replacement stuff. But along the lines of what's been suggested here tonight, I'm not aware of any charter that does that. And that's not to say that it shouldn't or can't. It just means that we're going to have the devil's in the details about how we draft the language. And again, as Natalie said, almost anything using the charter in a novel way, since the courts have very rarely interpreted this scope of authority for home rule municipalities and home rule townships in particular, that may be challenged, maybe other parts that are challenged, but having that in our heads, we move forward and do the best we can with the intent of the commission to achieve these goals.
But the challenge would have to come from somebody outside to challenge it. I mean, the court, from what I got, because there isn't anything on the books or any kind of case log about this, there'd have to be somebody that actually physically wanted to hire their own lawyer to challenge this.
Felt strong enough. I also think that our vacancies are just as big of an issue as our injection well is.
I do too.
And has been. And I think it might be something that we should, my opinion is we should be worth fighting. Vacancy and how we handle that should be worth fighting for. We have been left without a supervisor twice.
2 years. It's been
In the last
almost a
couple,
year.
in the last 5 years or so. I mean, this is something that happens in Highland Township. And then we get a supervisor, whether it's appointed by the judge or the other two supervisors, that we're not happy with. Because, again, we're back to the voters didn't get to decide who was that supervisor. It'll turn, if we don't lay it out, it's going to turn it right back into what it currently is.
I completely agree how you said.
I think it's a big enough subject that even if it hasn't been done before, I think we should be going.
Give it back to the voters.
It should always, whether it can be.
People brought it up at the meetings, this has been a
Yeah.
very big contentious thing at our meetings.
The way the vacancies are handled is as big as Seneca dumping waste down the hole. I think it needs to be taken on full force, and if there's litigation in the future, we'll deal with it then, as a township, hopefully as a whole.
Could the vacancy be put in the general election, so to speak, that worded that somebody appointed to a vacancy had to be into a prior election rather than just somebody that did not run through the election process?
Like somebody that's run for the office before?
Yes.
I think Misty and I had discussed that when we were studying the second-class township. We thought that it should go back to the last election to see who was the next one in line that would have gotten voted in.
I mean, so it'll give you a choice of the people running rather than this last one. You had 6 people show up that were never on polls or
Right.
never on any ballots, also want to be appointed.
Is that just for the interim appointment process?
I am a firm, my personal opinion is I'm a firm believer that a vacancy should always go back to the voters just as soon as it can. That's my personal opinion. It should be always back to the voters just as soon as the next voting time happens.
But Tim, what I thought you were trying to say is if we could write in where the person placed second would fill the vacancy.
Or-
So we
Right, that's,
Or that the vacancy could be taken out of somebody that went through that election
Yeah.
process.
rather than have the supervisors appoint someone to the next election and
Yeah,
have it go
that
back.
nothing to do with, we're nothing to do with in a voting situation, so just for instance, with Roy here not making it, he would be
Right.
eligible to be an appointed person. I mean, your last appointment, Mr. Gajic, was never in a situation where he didn't go through an election process at all, being on a ballot or anything. So, and just an idea, something to think about, that you're limited on your choices rather than just somebody out of the blue being pulled out of.
Well, Mr. Gazick, I think you're talking, would you like to see Lloyd be on the vacancy board?
Well, I'm just saying, it
Because-
should be one of the people that be picked from, rather than supervisors picked from somebody that had not gone through the election process. It's just up to you guys, it's just a thought.
Right,
So
I
that way
agree
you
with
already
that.
have those
It
people
should be
that are-
picked from the election, whoever was on the election should be the one chosen for the vacancy, then the township saying, oh, I don't agree on this, I don't agree, okay, I'm gonna appoint this person.
And I'm not against Mr. Gidget at the moment, I'm just saying that.
No,
you
no,
know
I
what
mean,
I'm saying?
because-
You know,
yeah,
you didn't
yeah,
go through the
because-
process and all of a sudden to be appointed.
Because that's the only part where I got confused when you asked it, because I know it's not Joe, it's Mike.
Right.
Because Mike, in case of three of them, which there is three, but in case there was two of them, they couldn't come to a decision like in the past, then Mr. Gazick was going to be the tiebreaker vote.
He'll agree on anything.
Is that, so the suggestion here is that even for that interim appointment process until the next election is held, which would, allow anybody to run, that the appointment should come from somebody that ran in the previous election? Is that?
Right. That is correct.
Okay. Of course, if nobody ran, then, we're gonna have to massage the language a little bit and maybe do some research on that, but I can look into that if that's what you folks want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The vacancy, like I said, is just as big for Highland Township
Okay, yep.
as,
And if we went back to the last election, at least then we know we had somebody in it that the people wanted.
and that wanted to do the job.
Right.
Anything else on vacancies for tonight?
No.
Come on, Chuck. Okay, section 304, term of office. Our understanding was you folks wanted the supervisor terms reduced from 6 years to 4 years? Or is
Yes.
that correct? So that's what the language there says, starting with the next municipal election. Any disagreement or thoughts on that?
No.
Natalie and Thomas, we're at section 304, term of office. Sounds like that language is what the study commission was requesting. Do you have any commentary on that?
Sure. Yeah, we did some checking on that as well. And again, we didn't find anything in the statute or the case law saying you can't reduce points of supervisor term, so it looks like you can do so. Again, that comes with the same caveat that just because there's nothing that says you can't do it doesn't mean it wouldn't be subject to a possible legal challenge at some point. I think the possibility of that is less than in some of the other circumstances that we're talking about here, especially given that it looks like other homeowners charters have done similar sorts of things in their documents as well. One question that perhaps is worth considering is you're talking about reducing the term of office for supervisors, but there are also other elected officials within the township, and so it might be worth considering if you want to reduce those terms as well, or if you want them to remain as they are. So that's up for consideration. We don't necessarily need to answer that tonight.
It's usually auditors and tax collector.
Yeah, I think our auditors are already 4 years, and what Sam stands for is 4.
Yeah.
So it kind of matches. I think as us as a group, we were just looking to get more of a turnover, and that way if they're liked in the situation, instead of being 6, because I think there's only 2 townships in Pennsylvania that do have 6. We're one of them, and everybody else is 4, for the most part.
Some have staggered, like Grant Township's got some 4 and some 6. But, so at this point, you want to only apply to the supervisors, or do you want that across the board for elected positions? And
Just to the supervisors.
Just supervisors.
Okay. Section 305, authority of existing officers. This basically just says that those in power at the time of this charter's enactment stay in power. They hold their positions for the term of office. So that's what this is saying. Section 306, there was conversation about health insurance for the supervisors in terms of if they had access to other forms of health insurance, should the township be required to provide health insurance? I think that was the question that was
Correct.
put forward. I didn't put any language in here because we had some legal stuff that we wanted to present to you before actually seeing what we can do here. Thomas and Natalie, we're at section 306 in health insurance. I know we had some research that we wanted to present.
Yep. So regarding the health insurance, our recommendation would be to drop this. It's a fairly complicated legal conundrum and not terribly clear on a variety of different fronts. Thomas, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yep, so the primary difficulty here is that the federal health care law, the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, has instituted certain controls and restrictions on how you offer health care and health insurance to employees. And essentially, the regulations themselves, which I took a glance at this morning, as well as from a prior client a couple months ago, is that the Affordable Care Act requires that you offer equal packages to all employees. So it's your choice as an employer not to offer a package at all to anyone. But if you do offer a package, a health insurance plan to someone or health coverage to one of the employees, you have to offer it to all. And it has to be on on comparable benefit terms. And that's being litigated now in 8,000 different ways, what comparable means. But in essence, if you try to deny one of your employees the ability to either buy into health coverage, health insurance policy, or offer it somehow in which it's restrictive to only certain employees but not others, that you run into some significant problems. And because of the way Obamacare is structured, those significant problems can instantly become federal issues because the federal law that mandates is structured downward. So our recommendation about dropping it is really based and anchored on those concerns. That number one, you may not be able to do it legally, and number two, even if you found a way to do it legally, it may actually require dropping health insurance or buy-in for health insurance plans across the board. So essentially withdrawing health insurance from all of the supervisors within the township, which may be within your power to do, but it's not necessarily perhaps the policy decision that you're making here. So those things have to be weighed, but it's our recommendation that probably not a good idea to try to do something selectively around the health insurance stuff.
I kind of agree with that. If it's gonna cause
Does that
a lot
matter if they're
of legal
full-time?
things,
Yeah, just drop it.
just drop it, yeah. Leave it alone.
Your thoughts?
I was wondering that too.
I was just wondering if we can drop it for all supervisors,
It's
not dropping
basically
it
a
for
part-time job, right?
employees.
He shows up and gets paid, what, once a month?
For a meeting.
But as far as somebody that's on the road gang, they're a full-time employee,
Right.
is there a difference between part-time and full-time? I don't know too many places that insure their people that are part-time help,
See, that's what I was
but
thinking
have
too.
to insure their full-time.
Same with me and my job. There's 30 of us and only 5 of us are full-time. Therefore, we work over the amount of hours under the Obamacare so we get benefits. But the other people work under 5.5 hours a day. Our employer does not have to offer them benefits. The 5 of us, they have to.
It's the school system, right?
It's the school system.
Right.
And
We make it
that's government.
employees work that
Yeah,
work
you know,
32 hours a week.
Because think about it,
for-
supervisors, if they have 1 meeting a month, 2 meetings a month, you're looking at a maximum of even 4 hours.
Right, and then we're paying for their health
And
care.
we're paying an astronomical price for
Their
health
insurance, and yeah, and they already have their own insurance. And
Now, I'm not sure about anybody else, like, Will Christie would be under that. The amount of hours.
But she would be a full-time employee.
Is she,
Is
I
she
thought she
full?
only works 4 hours a day.
She only works 4 hours a day.
Yeah.
I'm just
So
trying
ba-
to, you know, if it's gonna save the taxpayers money,
Basically, what
if we
Mr.
can legally do it, but evidently we can't do it, so. I
What
mean,
Mr.
I'm not
Lindsay's
an
saying
attorney.
though, is if you drop supervisors, you'd have to drop everybody in the township.
I mean, so Natalie and Thomas, the question is coming up of whether it can be distinguished between, say, full-time guys that are on the road crew versus part-time employees, such as the secretary or the supervisors who appear to be part-time, if that's a distinguishing factor.
Thomas, you have thoughts on that?
I believe it is, because it comes down to designation of those employees and what their capacities are, and therefore gives you some room on the comparable benefit stuff, but we would need to do some more work on that. So my preliminary answer is yes, you probably can, as long as the classification exists among the employees. So that you're making the offer to one class of employee. In other words, that's how it would look in legal language. But we'd want to do a little more research on that before we gave a definitive answer, but I think my preliminary thought is yes, you could.
Yeah, because if it is part-time employees, I would even think about expanding it to all Highland Township part-time employees.
But the part-time would be, well, how many hours? 23?
32.
32
Less
hours?
than 32.
Is full-time.
Less than 32 is part-time, 32 and over is full-time.
All right, so if it would only apply to full-time people, and Christie only works like 4 days, 4 hours?
I don't know.
That's like 16 hours.
I guess I
Yeah,
don't know
Monday
her
through-
hours.
Monday through Thursday.
Thursday.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's 16 hours.
8 to 1.
I don't even know if that would qualify anyway, so.
If it's still something you want to pursue, we're going to have to do some more research and figure out what it is you're trying to get at.
Research it.
Look into it more?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I'll write it down, but Natalie and Thomas, there is a request to figure out a bit more on the research in terms of whether it can be denied to part-time and what that looks like.
Okay.
Okay, anything else on health insurance before we move on? Okay, section 307, this is recall, or as some folks refer to it as impeachment, the possibility of removing somebody from office if you don't like the job that they're doing. We know that we have stated there's some difficulties with this. Natalie, did you want to talk about the legal stuff with recall?
Sure. There are a lot of things in the home rule code that are not clear. This is not one of them. It's one of the few exceptions. There have been a couple of cases that have examined this question, and those cases, the sort of summary of those cases is that the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania has ruled recall to be unconstitutional. So that would mean that if folks wanted to fight against something like that, the case law deck is stacked against putting in a recall. To say that if folks feel that there's a manifest injustice, that it isn't something that's worth fighting for, but it's worth making a decision, weighing the balance of where the case law is at, which is fairly clear, versus how much it makes sense to fight for something like that within the community and the situations that you encounter yourself facing. All that said, I'd like to offer two possible alternatives to also think about as an alternative to a recall provision within the Home Rule Charter. The idea of a recall provision being that it serves as a check upon the power of elected officials. Two other sorts of mechanisms that don't actually serve to remove the person from the position of power, but might serve to check the decision of the elected board. The first might be amending the Home Rule Charter or an initiative and referendum procedure, which are two separate things, which we'll talk about shortly. But there's the same idea where citizens actually pass legislation themselves that can override the decisions of the elected body, or using an emergency meeting provision, which I think Chad is going to talk about here shortly, as another procedure by which to check the decision-making of the elected authority. So to sum that all up, the case law is fairly clear. This is an issue that's been tried and litigated. The court doesn't like it. That said, it's a question of deciding which battle is the right battle to fight, and if it's one that makes sense to fight in Highland Township for you folks. And if it's not, or if it's something that folks are still interested in pursuing in some other sort of fashion in terms of checking legislative power, maybe using an alternative mechanism like amending the home rule charter, establishing an initiative and referendum process, or using the emergency meeting provision. Thomas, do you have anything to add there?
No, I think that covers it.
Okay. Does that make sense to folks?
Yeah, basically, we can amend the home rule through petition or pass legislation to override the ordinances or whatever. And then second might be an emergency town meeting that you can discuss later. Yeah.
The question is whether to include recall, understanding that the courts are not fond of it, that it's been tried under some other provisions and the courts have ruled against it. As Natalie was saying, it doesn't mean you can't try it. If you feel it's that important, you could put it in and try a new angle, and something like that. If you feel it's that important to have in there. There's also the explanation process for this to the community, which is that could also open you up to pot shots. If you put something like that in there and people are going to say, well, clearly these cases have been tried in the past and, this is, a provision that's been tried by the courts and here you folks are trying it again. If it's important enough to you, you might say, yeah, we think it is important enough and we're willing to have that fight again. But it could also open you up to criticism.
Sounds like it's gonna be a
That's what I'm thinking too.
real slippery.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't need
we-
that.
We would forget about that one.
Yeah.
Good call.
Okay, so we'll drop that. Okay, we're almost halfway done. That's a joke, we're good. Article 4, this is the prohibitions and enforcement section. This is where some of the language is put in to make the rights real. So as Thomas was talking earlier about or the rights tied to the prohibitions, these are specific prohibitions within the charter that make things illegal within the township. So section 401, depositing of waste from oil and gas extraction, that's basically the language from your injection well ordinance that we jammed in here. So that makes the injection well illegal within Highland Township as a protection of the rights from Article 1. Any questions or comments, concerns on that? Okay. Natalie, Thomas, we're at the section 401. Did you want to offer any legal perspective on that?
If there aren't any questions, Thomas, do you have anything to jump in on there?
Nope.
Okay. Section 402, privatization of water. I think some of this was brought up by Misty, so I'm not sure if we want to come back to that when she gets back. Okay.
Whatever, cigarette.
Misty, we're talking about section 402 right now, which I just put a placeholder in there about water. I think it was water privatization. There was some discussion at a recent meeting about further water protection. I think about whether water could be bottled or sold, or whether there was other protections you wanted in place. We're not sure that we heard it right, but just wanted to check in and see if there was further water protection language that you wanted here, or if we heard something wrong.
I just thought there was a concern. The reason why I had put that on the agenda, the thing, is there was concern about us selling our water to a private company, and that private company coming in and raising the prices to whatever they wanted to for the water. So it was more about protecting the price of the water versus.
Well, I thought you wanted to see if we could put it into there where they couldn't sell Highland Township water municipal system. to a private organization.
But now I have a question because not all of Highland Township's on the same water.
Right.
Yeah, but I think we should write it in, if we are gonna go down this avenue, we should include your guys' water supply in the system.
Well, what about?
I have a problem with concerning our water with anything legal because,
Because of what's happening.
yeah, well, not only that, but DEP's threatening to shut our water source down now, you know?
What about even just commercial use of water?